Thank you for that introduction, Nathan. I appreciate the embarrassing photos as well. That was from our vacation Bible school this past summer. I got to be a superhero named Pizza Man for our Hero Headquarters Vacation Bible School, and my wife helped me with the attire and my wonderful mustache, and then she helped me get dressed for this conference and look just a little bit better today than I did back then. I also want to thank my wife for something else pretty cool. She allowed me to borrow this neat device. It's an iPod Touch for our journey. I was able to take that on the plane, and it does lots of really cool, amazing things. I don't know if you've had a chance to play around with something like this, but the technology is amazing. You can listen to music, you can watch videos, you can have all sorts of different things you can play around with in it. But I think it's ironic that a high-tech device like an iPod is also something that has really increased something that's pretty low-tech. 5 years ago, if I said the word Kindle to you, you'd think of fire. Now, you think about the most gifted item in the history of Amazon.com. Here's the thing. If I have a presentation, dramatic reveal, reading is making a comeback. Woo! Some of you are more excited than others. But I think it's really cool. People are reading in more and more places than ever before. Because of devices like the iPod Touch and the Kindle and the Nook, all of these e-reader devices have really increased the number of book sales out there. E-book sales have climbed to about 10% of the entire market, and the sale of these devices have been up 193% since just last year alone. It's really moving forward. It's growing. And I don't know exactly why this is happening. My gut says it's just because people finally think that it's cool to read when you're holding this rather than a copy of Lord of the Rings. I think it just looks cooler in public that way. But regardless of the reason, I think it's great that more of us, and therefore more of you, are reading in increased numbers. But that brings up an interesting question. When we think about reading, I want us to consider what are you getting from your books? What are you getting from your books? Different books contribute differently to our lives. I just grabbed a few random examples of books out there. We have everything from Green Eggs and Ham, Jurassic Park, Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, the Bible. We start looking at these books and think, what do we get from them? Does it create enjoyment? And we can look through and have a chart here. Yes. For some people, Green Eggs and Ham is a lot of fun. My kids have enjoyed that. Other people with a sick, twisted mind enjoy A Brief History of Time, and that's okay. Does it teach information? And certainly all of them teach information to some degree, even fiction you can learn from. Does it showcase talent? Yes. Does it elicit emotion? Yes. But the big question is, what about truth? Are we getting truth from this material? Because I don't know. I read Green Eggs and Ham, and I think, well, you know, I'm not a fan of eating green eggs and ham, so maybe there's some truth there. I look at Jurassic Park. There's some truthful things in there. There's some truthful things maybe in Stephen Hawking's books. And in the Bible, you start asking people, is it true? And they're not sure. We don't want to take a real firm stand on truth. And that's not a criticism of anyone or any book. It's just simply an acknowledgement that we have difficulties with the concept of truth. Books fill us with ideas, and we think about these ideas, but are they true? It's hard to say with certainty. We just have to start to wonder. Now, that question about truth, it's been around for a long time. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, it started off. Remember a guy named Pontius Pilate, during the crucifixion trial of Jesus, he asked that question famously, what is truth? And taken seriously, that is a heavy question, and it leads us into some big philosophical arguments. There's a huge realm of scientific study, not scientific, but philosophical study out there where people discuss the nature of truth. The entire field of epistemology is out there where people discuss what is the nature of truth. And they can spend hours and hours with these philosophical discussions. And we could do that too this morning. If we really wanted to figure out what is truth, we could delve into that subject and we could talk about it for hours and probably leave here without a lot of satisfaction. Because philosophy can be interesting. But we don't live in a philosophical world. We live in a practical world. We live in a real world that's filled with jobs and families, mortgages and medicines, and we don't have time for the philosophical debates. But this is important because we still need truth. We still need truth. We have a need to deal with truth because practically every one of you came in this morning dealing with truth in one way or another. Just to be here in this room this morning, you engaged in truth. You chose your clothing based on the assumption that the weatherman's forecast for the day was in the ballpark of true. You ate cereal this morning based on the assumption that the list of ingredients in your Cocoa Puffs was true. It doesn't contain poisonous substances unless all of a sudden puffed corn is a poisonous substance. You drove here assuming that the directions you got from Google Maps or TomTom were true. You stopped for gas and coffee, and you double-checked SportsCenter just to make sure that what you saw last night about the Rangers was true. Okay? You do all these different things, and you buy something at the gas station assuming that when you pull out your debit card that the balance that you have listed is true. Although maybe we'd like that not to be quite so true. Can I get an amen? Hey, and you just said amen, a word meaning truly, to some guy that you've never met before, at a conference that you've never been at before, but you assume that it's going to tell you truth because the brochure says it's true, right? We assume all these things about truth. Practically, we make judgments about truth every single day. We think about it every single day, and those judgments guide us and they inform us. Now, when we're faced with reading material, we would do well to do the same thing. We should do well to find firm conclusions about the truth of what we read. It's time to avoid being wishy-washy. We need to stand up and say firmly, this is truth, this is a lie. We do that daily with the rest of life. We need to do it with what we read. And so this morning I feel very comfortable coming before you today and saying with absolute certainty, green eggs and ham is a lie. I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and hams. I do not like them. Sam, I am rubbish. Okay, that's really not my main point. This is really the more important issue, the Bible. Because I feel equally comfortable coming in front of you this morning and saying the Bible is true. This is truth. And maybe you've come to that conclusion already. Maybe you believe that, and maybe you haven't. But either way, it's time to decide. It's time to figure this out. Because if this is true, this has some really big practical application for your life, and especially for your future. Now, we don't have time this morning to debate it from every single angle. All the epistemology, philosophical discussions out there, we don't have time to get into everything about truth. But we do have time to run through some very practical, everyday, common sense tests of truth. These are some things that you use every day in your life, things that you do all the time, and they serve you very well. And so I would just ask that this morning, work with me. Let's go through some of these tests of truth and see where you stand when we look at the Bible. Let's discover the truth. You ready? Well, let's talk about first things. How do we know something is true? First of all, to start, we need to consider whether it was true in regard to past events. Because past truth matters. If you doubt me, I just want you to ask anybody who ever took this product. Cocaine tooth drops. Cocaine toothache drops. Great for the kids, as you can see. This is back from 1885, and you look through advertising from this era, and you find out that actually cocaine was used in a lot of different products until about 1914 when they started to pull it. According to one manufacturer, cocaine could make the coward brave, the silent eloquent, and render the sufferer insensitive to pain. That's great. But we now know just a little bit more about cocaine. We know that it might not be the best substance for us. It has a lot of dangers to it. It's highly addictive, and it's something that we probably should not be giving in place of Tylenol. This past truth is in fact a lie. And as such, we can ignore its claims for the present and for the future. Past truth matters because it carries over. We need to know the truth about past events. If it was true then it remains true now. And if it was false then, it remains false now, even if they thought it was true before. With the Bible, this issue is huge because the Bible is filled with information about past events. It talks about a lot of different things that happened in the past. And so it raises the question, can we trust the Bible's claims about the past? Can we trust the Bible's claims about the past? If so, then we have to take those teachings seriously, if they're true. If not, we can safely dismiss the book as just another great piece of literature that really has no bearing on our lives today. There are a number of different ways to look at the Bible and evaluate those past truth claims, but I want to look at 3 everyday tests of truth that we would use. Because if it's good enough for the rest of life, it should be good enough for this. And the first truth has to do with the source. I start thinking about the source, and here's the question. Here's the test. Do I trust the source? Do I trust the source? Now, I've spent very little time in Texas. This is my first time really spending any time in the area beyond a layover at DFW and stopping at a Whataburger on a quick pass-through West Texas. By the way, Whataburger ketchup is amazing. We had it last night. I love it. That's great. But most of what I know about Texas and its people comes not from firsthand knowledge, but I hear these things and I say they're probably true. I believe that Texans love their football. Okay? I believe that Dallas is sometimes called the Big D. I believe that I should be able to get some good barbecue or Tex-Mex somewhere within a 1-mile radius of wherever I stand. I've heard those things. I believe those things, and I believe them because somebody told me. People told me these things, whether these are from friends or whether it's from magazine authors or people who were on TV who showed it. I believe these things because people told me. Now, I don't believe everything that I've ever been told. That means you, ShamWow guy. But I recognize that if the source is trustworthy, then I'm going to accept what they say as truth. So what happens when I apply this test to the Bible? What happens when I apply this to the Bible? Does it show me that my sources related to the Bible are trustworthy when it comes to the past truth that's out there? And in a word, yeah. Yeah. I find out a lot of different things. I start looking at it and I say, you know what? The source has remained intact. If the Bible were a lie, I would expect that it would have been modified somewhere along the way. Instead, when I look at the Bible, I find that the Bible that I have here this morning is the same as what they had all the way back when it was written. Now, of course, there are various English translations along the way, and your King James Version and the NIV version and whatever I have here, the Holman Christian Standard Version, they might read a little bit differently. But the Greek and the Hebrew text, the originals that they're based off of, are the same from when they were written. They have remained unaltered. Now, the process for figuring that out is pretty simple. You know something that was written way back in ancient history. They didn't have Xerox machines, so they had to make copies of it for it to be passed down. And to figure out if something that I'm holding is an accurate representation of what it said way back then, all I have to do is figure out when this was written, figure out when my earliest copy is, and figure out how many copies I have, and then cross-check it. You know, for example, Plato, the philosopher there, wrote a lot of stuff between 427 and 347 BC. He wrote some stuff back there. The earliest known copy that we have of his writings come from around 900 AD. Okay, that means there's about 1,200 years of a gap between when he first wrote it and when we could find our earliest copy. Okay, fair enough. Things get destroyed along the way. People lose them. They misfile them. They burn them up, whatever. But we find those, and we find out that there are 7 copies of that manuscript, and we cross-check them, and we look at those, and we say, you know what, those seem pretty consistent, so we're pretty confident that what we have now is the same thing that he wrote back then. Okay? We do that with all of the other texts from the ancient world, too. The writings of Caesar, the writings of Aristotle, and others. Most of these things have gaps of 500 or more years from the original writing to the copy, and we have a handful of copies that we look at, and we can compare, and we say, yeah, that's trustworthy. Okay? When we look at the New Testament, when we look at the Bible, the New Testament was written between 50 and 100 AD, different dates in there. Our earliest copies date back to 130 AD. The gap is less than 100 years, and we look at the number of copies that we have to cross-check it. There are over 24,000 copies or fragments of copies that we have for cross-checking.